Late one night in Makoko, a floating slum built on stilts above the Lagos lagoon, the silence was broken by screams. People peeked through cracks in their wooden homes, but no one dared to step outside. In the shadows, Zahara, a 23-year-old woman with soft eyes and a strong voice, was being dragged through the narrow walkways by her husband's family. She was barefoot, her wrapper was slipping off one shoulder. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. They called her a witch. Why? Because she had a law diploma. Because she asked questions. Because she had once told her husband's mother, "A woman is not born to kneel." In their eyes, that made her dangerous. They had been planning this, whispering about her boldness, waiting for the right night to silence her. And tonight, under a moonless sky, they did it. Children watched from cracks in the walls. Old men shook their heads but said nothing. One woman tried to shout, but her husband pulled her back inside. "Stay quiet," he whispered, "or they'll come for you too." Zahara's voice had once filled the tiny home she lived in, reading books, teaching her niece, debating radio news. Now her voice was swallowed by the night, choked by fear and humiliation. They pulled her to the edge of the slum, where land met water, and pushed her down. "Leave," they spat, "before your cursed mouth ruins us all." She didn't scream anymore, but inside her something stirred. Not fear, something deeper, something burning. Zahara wasn't a criminal. She didn't steal, she didn't lie, and she didn't hurt anyone. Her only crime was that she went to school. She got a diploma in law, the first in her family, and even more than that, she spoke her mind. When something felt wrong, she said it. When someone was treated unfairly, she spoke up. She believed her voice mattered, but in her husband's family, that voice made her dangerous. They didn't like that she knew her rights. They didn't like how she spoke with confidence, or how she asked questions men couldn't answer. "A woman should kneel, not argue," her mother-in-law snapped one evening after Zahara corrected her at the dinner mat. Her husband stayed quiet, his eyes cold, ashamed that his wife dared to be smarter than him. Behind closed doors, the gossip grew. The women in the family called her proud. The men called her stubborn. They said she was trying to control the home with book sense. But Zahara wasn't trying to control anyone. She just wanted respect. She believed marriage was about partnership, not silence. But they didn't see it that way, so they decided to break her. That night, while the world slept, they stormed into her room. Her husband stood by the door, watching. No one protected her. No one asked questions. They called her a witch, a disgrace, and worse. They tore at her clothes. They dragged her outside. They told the neighbors she was cursed, that her education had made her mad. Zahara kept asking, "What did I do wrong?" But no one answered, because deep down, they knew. She hadn't done anything wrong. She had simply dared to be more than they could control. And in their minds, that was enough to punish her, enough to silence her. But what they didn't know was that Zahara's voice wasn't so easy to kill. Yes, they left her broken, cold, and bruised. But deep inside, her fire was still there. Quiet now, yes, but still burning. They dumped her like garbage. It was just before sunrise when a small truck stopped near a quiet village church. Zahara, weak and half-conscious, was pushed out with nothing but torn clothes and bruises. Her feet were bleeding. Her body ached. Her hair was matted with dirt. The truck drove off without a word, without looking back. She lay there for a while, not knowing where she was, or if this was a dream, or a nightmare that refused to end. The village was still asleep. The air was cold. A security guard by the church saw her, but instead of helping, he stepped back. "I don't want trouble," he muttered, pulling his jacket tighter and turning away. Others saw too, shopkeepers opening early, women heading to the well. But no one stopped. No one wanted to get involved. She heard whispers. "Is she mad? Maybe a witch? She doesn't belong here." Zahara could barely sit up, but something in her eyes had changed. She wasn't crying anymore, not even shaking. A quiet strength was building in her, something even she didn't understand yet. It wasn't anger, it wasn't revenge, it was will, the kind that comes when you have nothing left to lose. She dragged herself to the steps of the church and sat there in silence. Her body was weak, but her mind was spinning. They had taken everything, her home, her marriage, her pride, but they had not taken her name. They had not taken her mind, and they had not taken her voice, even if it was quiet now. She whispered to herself, "They think they ended me." But even as the sun rose and people walked past her like a ghost, Zahara felt something inside her rise too. Not just hope, but purpose. They had left her at the door of strangers, but life was not finished with her. Not yet. Zahara sat outside that church for hours, cold and invisible, until a woman passing by finally stopped. Her name was Mama Chiku, a young widow with kind eyes and a tired scarf wrapped around her head. She didn't ask many questions. She just looked at Zahara, saw the pain, and said softly, "Come with me, my child." Mama Chiku lived in a tiny shelter made of wood and rusted iron sheets, just a few streets away. It was crowded, 5 children, no husband, barely enough food, but she still found space for Zahara. That night, she gave Zahara a blanket, a bowl of warm rice, and something even more powerful, kindness. Zahara didn't speak much at first. Her voice felt trapped, like it was afraid to come out. But Mama Chiku didn't push her. She just let her rest. And slowly, Zahara began to heal, not just her body, but her spirit. One afternoon, as the neighborhood kids played outside, Zahara heard one of them struggling to read. Something inside her stirred. She asked gently, "Can I help?" The boy nodded. Zahara picked up a torn schoolbook from the floor and began to read aloud. Her voice was shaky at first, but the kids gathered around her, listening closely. From that day on, every evening, Zahara sat on the floor and taught them letters, words, how to speak with confidence. The same voice her husband's family tried to crush was now lighting up young minds. Kids began calling her Teacher Zahara. Even adults came by the window to listen. Mama Chiku watched with quiet pride. "They tried to silence you," she said one night, "but your voice was always meant to rise." Zahara still had nightmares. She still woke up shaking sometimes. But every time she stood in front of those kids, she felt stronger. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to live. And that tiny shelter, with its leaking roof and broken floor, became the place where Zahara's fire came back to life. They had tried to destroy her, but here she was, rising, one word at a time. Zahara knew she couldn't stay in the shelter forever. She was grateful for Mama Chiku, but something inside her kept whispering, "There's more for you." So with a small bag of clothes, a few coins, and a notebook tucked under her arm, she boarded a rickety bus to Port Harcourt. She didn't have a plan, just hope, and a name she refused to let the world forget. She walked from office to office, asking for work. Most people didn't even look up. But one morning, a tired-looking secretary at a law firm said, "We need a cleaner, small pay. You want it?" Zahara nodded. It wasn't what she studied for, but it was a start. Every day she mopped floors, emptied bins, wiped desks. But she also listened. She watched how the lawyers moved, how they spoke. She memorized the way files were labeled, how clients were greeted. And late at night, after everyone left, she read forgotten case files left on desks. Her heart ached for the people in those stories, especially the women. She knew their pain. Then one day, the junior clerk quit without warning. The office was in chaos. Files were everywhere, phones ringing non-stop. Zahara saw the panic and quietly stepped in. "I can help," she said. At first, no one listened. But then she found the right document before anyone else and answered a client call like a pro. People stared. "Weren't you the cleaner?" "I studied law," she said simply. From that moment, everything changed. She wasn't wearing a suit. She wasn't sitting behind a fancy desk. But the clients didn't care. When Zahara spoke, they heard something powerful. Clarity, confidence, truth. Even the senior lawyer, a man known for being cold, pulled her aside one day and said, "You don't belong behind a mop." Zahara didn't need to prove herself with titles. Her words did the work. And slowly, the cleaner everyone overlooked became the woman everyone respected. She still cleaned sometimes, out of habit, out of humility. But now, she also handled case files, prepared documents, and even advised new clients. She had taken the job no one wanted, and from that low place, she rose with fire in her chest and purpose in her step. Zahara never forgot where she came from. Every mop she pushed, every file she read, every late night spent studying under a flickering bulb, it all built her. While working at the law office, she saved every naira she could. She borrowed old textbooks, studied during her lunch breaks, and took online classes on borrowed phones. Some nights she cried from exhaustion, but she never quit. 2 years later, Zahara stood outside the bar exam hall, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from pride. She walked in with her head high, and when the results came weeks later, she sat on the floor and wept. She had passed. She was finally a lawyer. Her first case came faster than she expected. A local NGO brought her the file of a young girl who had been accused of witchcraft by her family and thrown out of her home, just like Zahara once was. The girl was only 13, scared, alone. Zahara looked at her and saw her younger self. She took the case without a second thought. When Zahara entered that courtroom, people whispered, "Isn't that the cleaner from the law firm? She's representing a witch." But Zahara stood tall in her black gown and white collar. Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes didn't drop. She spoke for that girl, like she was speaking for every woman who had been silenced, abandoned, or shamed for being different. She told the judge, "This girl is not a curse. She is a child who deserves love, not fear." Her words hit like thunder. The courtroom went silent. She didn't just win the case. She made headlines. News stations picked up the story. Social media lit up. People across Nigeria started talking about the lawyer who rose from nothing and defended a girl the world had thrown away. Zahara walked out of that courtroom not just as a lawyer, but as a symbol. She had once feared those walls. Now she owned them. And the same voice they tried to crush in the slums of Makoko had become the voice that echoed through halls of justice. Loud, fearless, and unstoppable. One hot afternoon, Zahara was sitting in her office, going over case files when her secretary walked in and said, "Ma, there are 2 people here to see you. They say they know you." Zahara looked up. "Who?" The door opened before the secretary could answer. There they were, her ex-husband and his mother. The same people who had dragged her barefoot through the streets, the ones who called her a witch, who left her bleeding and broken. But this time, they weren't shouting, they weren't strong, they looked tired, older, lost. Her ex-husband's eyes couldn't meet hers. His mother, once so loud and proud, now stood quietly behind him, her head low, her wrapper worn thin. Zahara could feel the air shift in the room. For a moment she said nothing. She let the silence do its work. Then he spoke. "Our business? It failed. We've lost everything. Mama said we should come see you. We need help. Maybe a loan. Maybe a connection. Maybe—" Zahara raised a hand. "Stop." She stood slowly, calm, in control. "You dragged me out like trash," she said, her voice steady. "You left me to die. And now you come here, to the woman you threw away, asking for help." Her ex-husband swallowed hard. His mother wiped her eyes but said nothing. Zahara didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just looked them in the eye and said the words they would never forget. "I returned as treasure." The silence that followed was heavy. She could have thrown them out. She could have embarrassed them. But Zahara didn't believe in revenge. She believed in rising above. So she offered them water, listened quietly, and told them, "I forgive you, but I won't fund the same hands that once tried to bury me." They left with heads down, their pride crushed. Zahara watched them go, her heart calm, not angry, just full. She had nothing to prove anymore. They came thinking they'd find the girl they broke, but they found a woman they couldn't shake, strong, brilliant, and untouchable. The lights in the studio were bright, and the cameras were rolling. Zahara sat on the red couch of one of the most popular evening talk shows in Africa. Across from her was the host, smiling but clearly curious. The topic that night was women who rose from nothing. Zahara was the final guest, the one everyone had been waiting for. The host leaned in and asked, "Zahara, after everything they did to you, how did you find the strength to become who you are today?" Zahara took a deep breath. The room went quiet. "They called me too bold to be loved," she said, her voice steady. "Too educated, too loud, too difficult. But boldness is exactly what built me." The audience clapped softly, but Zahara wasn't finished. "They tried to silence me. My husband's family dragged me through the mud. I slept on church steps. I cleaned offices just to survive. But I never stopped believing that my voice mattered." She paused, her eyes shining. "I wasn't broken. I was being rebuilt." The host wiped a tear and whispered, "You're incredible." But Zahara smiled and replied, "No, I'm just one of many. There are thousands of women like me, smart, strong, silenced. I'm just lucky I got heard." By the end of the show, people in the studio were standing. Some were crying. That night, the episode aired across the continent. Within hours, her name was trending on social media. Clips of her interview were shared on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, everywhere. People from Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, and beyond wrote messages like, "She speaks for us all. Zahara is fire. I thought I was alone until I heard her." Young girls in remote villages watched her speak with tears in their eyes. Women in cities played her words again and again. Even men, fathers, brothers, husbands, began asking how they could do better. Zahara didn't go viral because of fame or money. She went viral because her story was real, raw, brave. She had been buried by her own people, and yet she rose, not quietly, but with a voice so powerful, all of Africa stopped to listen. Not long after her story went viral, Zahara began receiving letters, messages, and phone calls, not just from fans, but from women who were suffering, just like she once did. Some were being kicked out of their homes, some were being beaten, some were just girls, young, scared, and silenced. Zahara read every message with tears in her eyes. She couldn't ignore them. She remembered what it felt like to sleep outside, with nowhere to go. She remembered the cold concrete, the hunger, the shame, and she made herself a promise. No woman who reaches out to me will ever feel that alone again. That's how her foundation was born. She called it the Zahara Trust, a place where women could get free legal help, and more importantly, a safe place to stay. The first building was small, just 4 rooms and a shared kitchen, but it was full of warmth, full of healing. She didn't just hire staff, she hired survivors, women like her, women who understood. Soon, donations started coming in. People from all over the country, and even abroad, wanted to help. Zahara used every naira wisely. Brick by brick, she built more shelters. She partnered with local lawyers to take on cases for abandoned wives, abused girls, and widows being chased off their land. She wasn't just offering roofs, she was offering rights. Some nights, she visited the shelters herself. She sat with the women, listened to their stories, held their hands, and when the time was right, she told them hers too. Not for pity, but for power. One woman said to her, "You gave me more than a home, you gave me back my name." Every time Zahara saw a woman step into one of her shelters with tears and later walk out smiling and free, she felt something sacred inside her. Not revenge, not pride, but peace. She had once been homeless. Now she was building homes. She had once been voiceless. Now she was helping others speak. Every stone she laid, every case she fought, every shelter she opened, it wasn't just about her past. It was about changing the future, one woman at a time. Years had passed since Zahara was dragged through the muddy paths of Makoko, barefoot, bruised and broken. But one morning, dressed in a simple white dress and low heels, she returned. No cameras followed her, no loud announcements, just her, walking slowly through the same streets where people once turned their backs on her. But this time, the air shifted. Children ran alongside her, whispering, "It's her, Mama Law." Women peeked from their windows. Men paused mid-step. And the same neighbors who once watched her suffering in silence now watched her with awe. Zahara didn't come back for revenge. She didn't need to shout or prove anything. Her presence alone said it all. "You tried to erase me, but I became unforgettable." She visited the local church where she had once collapsed, bleeding and unwanted. She spoke softly to the pastor, not in anger, but with grace. She donated books to the local school, gave a scholarship to the brightest girl in the village, hugged a crying mother who said, "I'm sorry we didn't help you back then." And when she walked past the house where her ex-husband's family still lived, she didn't stop. She just smiled. Because queens don't look back to fight, they walk forward to build. In Makoko, they now call her Mama Law, not because of her degree, not because of her fame, but because she turned her deepest wounds into bridges for others. She didn't need a crown to rule. Her strength, her story, and her spirit were more powerful than gold. The girl they threw out had returned, not for war, but to lead, to heal, to shine. And in doing so, she became the queen they never saw coming.